my early Melee community days, I used to make custom controllers, and I would like hand paint all of them. And I made one that I sold to a guy, and it was a Falco controller. And the guy was like, "Hey, are you going to Evo? Because I can pick it up from you there." And I was like, "Yeah, I am." He's like, "Okay, would you do me a favor? And would you get it signed by Mango? And then I'll buy it after he signs it." And he was too nervous or whatever, and I was like, "Yeah, I can do that. I don't care." So I didn't know Mango at all. I was like a O2 shitter. I go up to Mango. I had to wait in the Mango line.
Right, as one does.
And I go up to Mango and I'm like, "Hey, can you sign this?" And he's like, "Yeah." And because I was making the controllers, I had like a special pen that was like oil-based ink so that it would stay on the controller and not just rub off. So he goes to do it, instantly breaks the pen, and then ink goes all over the controller, completely ruining it.
What?
Also all over his hands. And it's like thick oil paint. Like it doesn't just come off. Like it just like sticks to you. And I was like, "Oh my God." It was totally his fault. Like he fucked all this up. But I was like, "I'm so sorry." I'm like apologizing for something I didn't do.
Yeah.
And then we both go to the bathroom because I'm getting it on my hands, trying to take the controller like out of his hands. And then we both go to the bathroom. We're like washing our hands awkwardly. I'm like, "Oh my God." The guy does not buy the controller from me anymore. He did not think the story was funny. I lose out on like the $200 or whatever. And then if you go look at all the VODs from that, like all like the BTS footage that people like Cassidy was shooting and stuff, his fingernails are all black because he couldn't get it off.
Oh no!
And I like to say that I fucked him. Like I made him think about something else that wasn't Melee. And then,
I thought you were gonna say his hands were still oily, and that's why.
Well, I think they were a little bit.
Oh,
you couldn't get it all out.
Who do you lose to? If it's HBox, it's your fault.
Probably. Yeah. It wasn't the one he got camped, but it was. He lost.
Damn.
And I was like, I think that's my fault.
Well,
my fault, OG.
Going back to how the transition. You told me those two guys, how they started with Ludwig. And then, see, for some reason, I thought it was like, yo, you're friends with this guy. He blows the fuck up. And now he's like, hey, I need help. I need my 3 friends to come on. And then bam, that's how it happened. But I guess it was more gradual than that.
No, I think maybe if you asked Ludwig, like, and he thought about it and answered, like, maybe he would say, like, it was important to him that he support his friends and, like, share the wealth, if you will. I think he's always been that kind of guy. Like, he's always been the type of guy who, like, when he sort of comes up, like he really try to like spread that to like the people he cares about. So maybe he would say something like that. But I think more realistically, like what was part of it at the time was just he needed help. Like he was trying to do stuff. He had ideas, but he couldn't do it alone. And it's really hard to do any sort of company management when you are the talent, when everything revolves around you going live that day for 8 hours and like having a relationship on top of that. And so he needed help. And for me, I basically always said no until the yard, because for me, I was like, I really like what I'm doing. That was the original thing we were talking about. I really like what I'm doing at Summit. Even when I quit Summit, I gave them 3 months. I said, I'm quitting.
Yeah,
I'm going to give you 3 months to find someone to replace me, and I'll stay. Yeah. So I did that. I did like all 3 of them for 3 months. And it was like the worst 3 months.
Really?
I was like dying. I had no time. We were like, I think my last event was, I don't know if you ever saw Mango Shab, Excellent Adventure. It was like a content piece we did, but it was like that was the last thing I worked on there was that it was like Mango and Shab time travel to kill Baby Zane.
See, I watched a lot of Summit in retrospect because I can't watch a lot of stuff on the weekends because all of our stuff's on the weekends as well. So I watch a lot of it and then, probably the problem that you had, I was a part of that problem where I just watched the sets and I didn't watch any of the skits. So
that's fair.
I apologize.
No, it's okay. I mean,
I watched some of the stuff like when I could. Blake watched a lot of shit. Blake watched a lot of stuff.
It was a reality check. Like I used to watch it and like rationalize in all these different ways. Like, well, they're probably not watching because, or this is bad. They're probably not watching. And I really had to think about it. I'm like, a big question I asked myself, which I think like people who make content for Smash like don't ask themselves enough, is like, if every single person in the market that you were making a video for watched your video, how many views would it have? And so if you look at Melee,
the absolute ceiling,
the absolute fucking ceiling, is it even 1 million views?
I don't think so.
Right? So like when
you got to think that.
So when you're not eating off of the shit you're making in Smash, you have to ask yourself like, is the problem the content? Or am I just like not thinking about what I'm making and its value to the more general audience of people who might find this interesting? And I think that people don't try to generalize their content enough to make it interesting to more people, or they view it as, well, I want to make content that's like for the fan, which is cool. But if you want to live off of it and you want it to be the thing you always get to do, you have to figure out both. And I think that when I was at Summit, I realized I was like, what we're making is so like,
it is
like a content piece,
but it's so good.
A content piece for fucking Axe and Mango are parodying. It's like you have to have seen the movie we're parodying. You have to know who Axe is. You have to know. You have to know what Smash Summit is, which means you have to know what Melee is. You have to be watching the event that day. Like all these things have to fall into place for anyone to even consume the thing you're making. So like when I realized that one day, I'm like, I don't think there's anything I can do to get people to watch my stuff. I think all I can do is leave and make other stuff. And so that's what I thought. Like,
yeah,
you could argue like, well, we could have revamped the content department and like had new goals of like maybe being more content focused and like not doing these event stuff and blah, blah, blah. Maybe, but it didn't feel realistic in like the time frame and with the budgets and like all that. It didn't feel realistic there. And with the yard kind of starting up, and I'm like, wait, I'm making more on the podcast I do
than my
full-time job.
Yeah.
I was like, it's time, and it was really, really hard. Like I think for me, it was Aiden and Slime were ready to leave.
Yeah.
For me, I was not ready to leave. But a big realization that I had, which I felt like was really important, was I realized I had never taken a risk in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I realized I was like, I've never jumped out of a nest unless there was another nest I was jumping into.
Yeah.
I've never just jumped out and been like, can I fly?
So you didn't view the yard as the nest.
The reason why I didn't at the time, it's really easy now to be like, it was obviously another nest. But at the time, the reason why I didn't feel that way was because one, at the time, it was so attached to whether or not Ludwig wanted to continue doing it. We just started it, and I'm like, if he says I don't want to do it anymore, this thing's just gonna end, and like I won't have a job.
Yeah.
And Mogul Moves didn't have like the promise back then that it did like more now. Like that, like Off-Brand has kind of provided more security to it. And also, like, sure, the yard was like starting to do well. But it was like, it's a fucking podcast. Like, am I going to want to do that in a year?
Right.
Are all four of us all going to want to do it in a year?
Yeah.
Like, I'm at the will of so many people's individual decisions that it felt like a risk. It felt like something that was like, I'm choosing my passion project. That's doing well and is a better bet than like trying to sell my like painted art somewhere.
Right, yeah.
It's a better bet than a lot of stuff. But I'm choosing my passion project over a job I really like that's pretty secure.
Yeah.
It's funny how like it basically became the opposite, where like Summit ended up going under, and this thing, and they're not related at all. Like, it was fucking awful. Yeah. But like, no matter how certain I was at the time that like one was a risk and the other was the secure thing, it ended up being the opposite, where I would have lost my job at Summit.
Yeah.
And potentially left behind an opportunity to like make this thing with my friends. So I think I learned like a big lesson that day. It was like, if you have like this thing in your gut that's like, I need to do this thing, like it's actually more important to try that thing and potentially go broke or lose your job than it is to like make $75,000 and like feel secure and